Welcome to BadgerBlade.com. I'm the Vez2, and welcome back to our continuing series of instructional how-to wet shave videos. Today we're going to talk about double edge or DE razors. There's a lot of choices out there. You've got vintage, you've got modern razors. I'm going to try to talk to you a little bit about some of them, tell you about the parts and pieces and how they work. Gillette came up with the first double edge razor in 1903. They produced the double ring razor. This is a single ring, which came out a couple years later. The single ring, like the double ring, has an inner barrel that would unscrew. The handle and base plate were all one piece, and then a top cap. This top cap had a threaded middle post and two barrel-shaped posts on the outside. Now these would line up with three holes that were in the blade to make sure that when you assembled this razor that razor blade was straight. There's some confusion out there between the double rings and the single rings. They're very similar. Some people will get one of these razors and they'll say, look, there's two rings on the bottom of this handle, so I've got a double ring. Well, that's not what indicates a double ring. So a double ring is identified by two rings at the top of the handle, whereas the single ring only has one. So if you're looking for a double ring, this is what you want to look for. Also in those early years, they made the old type. The old type, just like the double ring and single ring, were open comb razors. This is also a three-piece design, but this is typically what we mean when we say a three-piece design, is a solid handle that unscrews from the post in the top cap, and then a completely separate base plate. If you're going to load one of these razors, all you have to do is pick up your blade, drop it on the top cap, grab your base plate, drop it on top, and screw your handle on, and you are good to go. Now you do want to be careful because the sides of this blade does poke out of the side of the razor. So you want to grip it from the sides because you don't want to grip the side. You don't want to grip the edge of the blade. You want to grip the sides. But you can still cut yourself if you slice across the side of it, because even though it's not a sharpened edge, it's still very thin metal and you can get a cut from it. So you want to grip it from the sides, but you still want to be careful. Now, these razors were all serial coded, and using that serial code, you can determine the age of the razor. Now when you're looking at a single ring or a double ring razor, what you want to look for is a letter followed by a string of numbers along that inner barrel. If you're looking at an old type, what you want to look for is a serial number that is printed on the base plate. Now some old razors you might find have two, one on each side. Now if that happens, what that means is the first serial number was on there from the date of manufacture. The second serial number was put on there when the razor was returned to the manufacturer for repair. Early on they did repair some of these razors, especially some of the more expensive ones. So if you do find two serial numbers, chances are that one was returned to the company for repair. After the serial number series, we have a series of razors that were made with no date codes. The first one I'm going to talk about is the new. Now, what changed between the old type and the new, for one, is they extended out these open combs and curved them down a little bit, made it a little bit more smooth on your face. You didn't have the ends of these open combs poking you in the face, not that they were that sharp to begin with. But also, and probably most importantly to me, is the top cap. Instead of having the three posts, it only has the one center post, and now it has this bar going down the center. So that necessitated them changing the design of their blades. Originally the blade only had three holes. Well, now they have three holes and a long slot in the middle to accommodate going over that bar. So as they changed their razors, they changed the design, they had to also change the way they made their blades so that it could accommodate the new razor as well as the old razor. So every time they made a change, They changed the blade, they just added on. They added another cutout to the blade so that it would continually work with all of their razors down the line. Now after the open comb, they also made a solid safety bar razor. Now the solid safety bar razor is also a 3-piece design. This is a tech. Now the tech has these lather slots in the base plate. Now this would allow your lather as you're shaving to pass through those slots and basically build up underneath the razor as you're shaving, rather than passing through those open combs as they would in the news and old types. Now even though some of these razors didn't have date codes or serial numbers on them, you could still tell what year they were made from by the blades that were packaged with them, if you could find the original blades in the original package. In 1930, Gillette started date coding their blades with the letter A. 1931, the letter B, and so on. So you could tell from the date code on the blade what the date of manufacture of that razor was, or at least the year. So if you could narrow it down by your blade, and then there was a few different idiosyncrasies between some of the razors, like some of them had different end caps for certain years. So by going on to badgerblade.com and visiting our wiki, you can find out what some of those pieces are that are different, and sometimes you can narrow it down to a specific year. Some of your razors, you're only going to get a broad range of when that razor was made. Then we go into the 1950s, when they started putting those same date codes actually on the razors. Now in 1950, the first date code for a razor was the letter V. That's because in 1930 we started with A, and they kept using that same system when they transitioned to going out of the razor. So a lot of people wonder, well, why did they start with the letter V? Well, it's because they were already using that system for the blades, and they just transitioned over to using that same lettering nomenclature on the blade. So in 1950, it was the letter V, and then 1955 is when they started over with the letter A again. And it is important to note that in the blades, they did skip the letter Q, probably because the Q could be confused with an O. So there's actually only 25 letters in those date codes. Now, one thing that happened when we started using date codes is we also changed to a one-piece razor. Now the techs were still made, and so we still had 3-piece razors, but now we transitioned to the primary razor, and every razor that Gillette made after that, every new razor was a one-piece design. And now this is called a twist to open, or a TTO razor, because the knob on the bottom, you twist it and it opens. We also call this a butterfly style razor, because as we open it, those doors open like a butterfly's wing opens. So a few pieces to note on this: we have the doors, the silo doors. We have a center post, also called the load bar. This load bar has a notch in it. If you're going to load one of these razors, all you have to do is grab your blade again and put it directly over that center post and drop it in, and then close it up. Now what this notch was actually for is if you had blades that came in a dispenser, like these Persona blades, you could push the blade out and actually hook that slot on that and load it without ever touching the blade. This is part of what made this razor the super speed. It was super fast to load, and you could do it safely without touching the blade. You didn't have to worry about gripping it by the edges. You didn't have to worry about cutting yourself, dropping it. You could go right from the dispenser into the blade, or into the razor rather. And so it was very easy, very convenient, and this design really caught on. There were lots of razors that were made in that style. We have the Sheridans and Senators, which was an open comb design, but also a one-piece TTO razor. We have some more fancy razors like the Aristocrat, which had a little bit wider handle, much more heavier, good heft feel in your hand, gold-plated. so much more fancy design. We have women's razors like the Gillette Lady, which with a longer handle, a ball end on the handle to make it more convenient for women to use for shaving their underarms or shaving their legs. Then later, we also get to a new change with the adjustable razor. Now this was just like a Super Speed, except it has an adjustment collar on it that you can rotate and change the blade gap on the razor, which then in turn changes the aggressiveness of them. So they made 3 different styles of adjustable razors: the Gillette Fat Boy, the Gillette Slim, and the Super Adjustable, also called the Black Beauty because of the black handle. Now this one is very obvious which one it is. The Gillette Fat Boy and the Gillette Slim, there's a lot of confusion out there telling which one is which. Now, looking at these two side by side, it's pretty obvious to tell that the Fat Boy has the wider handle, the Slim has the skinnier handle. But if you just see one of these and not the other, it might not be so obvious. If you're perusing a internet site, or if you're looking at an antique store and you stumble on one or the other, you might not know what to look for to tell which one of these is which. So I've come up with what I think are the 3 biggest differences between these 2 razors. Now the first is the adjustment collar. If you're looking at the Fat Boy, the lines on the bottom of that adjustment collar go all the way down to the bottom. And when you look at the Slim, those lines go down, and then the bottom portion of that adjustment collar is smooth. The second thing is actually looking at the knurling on the handle itself. The knurling on the Fat Boy is crisscrossed, whereas the knurling on the Slim is cut in horizontal lines. Now for me, the easiest thing to look at was looking at the TTO knob itself. The knurling on the Fat Boy's TTO knob comes up, and then the last portion of it is actually smooth, whereas the knurling on the Slim goes all the way up the entire TTO knob. So if you just pick one of those and learn what it looks like on the Slim and what it looks like on the Fat Boy, you'll be able to tell at one quick glance which one is which. We talk about the date codes on the latter year razors. They're found in different places. So if you have something like a Tech, it's going to be on the bottom of the base plate. You're going to have a letter on one side and a number on the other side. If you've got something like the Fat Boy, it is going to be on the bottom of the razor as well, but it's going to be at just above the handle, a letter and then a number. Same with the Black Beauty, but I wanted to highlight one difference on the Black Beauty. On the earlier years, up to 1976, they were on the bottom of the base plate. From 1977, they were actually inside the silo doors on the inside of the tray. So from 1977 on, for the Black Beauties, they were inside. And also on your Super Speeds, they are on the bottom of the tray. Now there are also other companies besides Gillette that were trying to make razors to sell. Gillette, I think, hands down was the most popular razor, as identified by just the sheer number of them that are out there and the ease in which you can find Gillette razors as opposed to some of the other razors. But there were some other companies out there that were pretty popular and made really good razors. So something that you might find very frequently is a Schick Krona. Again, it's just a regular twist to open razor, very similar to the Super Speed. Has a longer handle, has some plastic on there. Persona and Star razors are out there. Persona and Star were companies of the American Safety Razor Company, which is the company that still makes the Persona blades. You've got razors like this Hofritz razor, which is actually a 2-piece design. So much like the older razors where you turn the twist to open thing at the bottom, that just releases the top cap with a longer post, and everything else is solid. So the twist to open knob never comes out like the inner barrel did on the single ring. Barbasol also made a two-piece razor. This one does have a shorter threaded middle. And if you ever have any problem getting one of these to go in, if you're twisting it and it's not grabbing, just push down on the cap and get those threads engaged and it'll go right down. There was also some British companies like Darwin made this really neat Art Deco handle made of cobalt steel. There was also some plastic razors, like this Fasan Slant, or this Nelite 400, which is actually a Bakelite razor. Now I'm going to talk about some of the gimmicks and oddball razors that are out there. Now some of these things were created, I think, as a way to compete with the standard Gillette razors that were out there. They were trying to come up with some sort of a gimmick that made their razor more appealing, made it seem like their razor could cut better because of this. Now, one of the more successful gimmicks is the slant razor, and I say it's more successful because they still make slant razors today. Now, what happens in a slant razor is they take this base plate and twist it. Now, what happens is the razor blade then in turn gets slanted, so instead of coming straight down on your whiskers, it comes down with a slant and actually slices those whiskers. Now, any chef will tell you that it's much more efficient to slice across like that, diagonally across your food, than to slice straight down on something. If you've got a slightly dull knife and you're trying to cut into a tomato and you just try to come straight down on it, you're not even going to pierce the skin. You need to give it that slicing action to get it started, and then it's going to go much easier through there. So that's the idea behind a slant. A lot of people love these slant razors. Some people think they're more aggressive than a normal razor, so they don't prefer them, but a lot of people do. They're still very popular. One of the other gimmicks, this Stolly Live Blade razor. This is a beast of a handle, but there's a reason for that. There's a mechanism inside here that when you twist the handle, it actually makes this entire handle vibrate. Now, the base plate on here is the safety bars are sort of separate from the base plate, but they're connected by spring steel. So as this handle rotates, it actually vibrates this base plate and the safety bar back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, very fast, which basically makes your razor blade go back and forth as it's slicing down. Now, it's not enough of a movement to actually cut your skin, but it does slice through very effectively. I love this razor. Very similar to that idea is this King oscillating razor. Now, instead of being mechanical and wind up and vibrating, there are wheels on the top of this razor. Now, as these wheels spin across your face as it's coming down, it actually moves that blade back and forth to give you that same type of slicing action across your face. And the Shake Sharp razor. This is kind of a unique design. You might look at this and think, well, that's a single edge razor. It is in the fact that there's only one edge showing, but it does take a double edged blade. So the other edge of that blade is inside, not being used. So when this side gets dull, you could flip it around and use the other side and get twice the performance out of it. But what this razor's unique design was that once the blade was loaded, and especially if you had a carbon steel blade, it doesn't really work on the modern stainless blades, but if you had a carbon steel blade in there, you could shake it back and forth, and what happens is this bottom piece comes out, and there is a hone inside this razor that would slide across the edge of your blade and would theoretically hone it and keep it sharp, so that you would need to change your blade less often. So that was a big selling point to those razors. One other unique design that I love is this Williams DE razor. Now this is a split handle design. So you've got these two prongs on the side that you push together, and the handle actually splits open from the side. You can load the blade in there and then close the handle back up and just pinch it closed, and when you get the snap, then it's perfectly closed. Now this is a closed comb razor. A lot of people say, well, if you have an open comb, then you got to have a closed comb, right? Well, yes, there are a few examples out there, and this is one of them. It definitely has a comb, but the very edge of this is sort of like a safety bar, and it is closed. Another thing, aside from gimmicks that would set one razor apart, or one razor manufacturer rather, is by having a proprietary blade. So this Seagull razor is very unique. A one-piece razor, twist to open. As you twist it, it kicks that top plate up, or the top cap, rotates it, and leaves it in that position. The blade that it would take actually has a large cutout so that you can slide the blade all the way on top of that top cap. Once it's in place, you just twist it back, and there it is. Now you can modify modern blades if you have a sharp pair of scissors or some tin snips. It's not going to look pretty on the inside, but once you close it up, you shouldn't notice any difference on the edge, and you should be able to shave with it just fine. A lot of people still use these. If you can find some vintage blades that were meant for it, you can use those, or you can modify a current blade. The Durham Duplex company started making shavette-style razors, and then eventually transitioned to making double-edge razors. They made a few different designs. The blade that it takes is much bigger and much wider than a Gillette double-edge razor, as you can see. Now I love these because of the wide design. I think it's much more efficient to use. It's very comfortable. You can actually shave with fewer passes. So you can either find some vintage Durham Duplex blades, or the other opportunity is if you can find Persona Pathology blades. They are the same size as a Durham Duplex. You can get them from medical supply warehouses to use your Durham Duplex razors. And that about covers what I was going to talk about for vintage razors. Now, moving on to a couple of examples of modern. Some people don't like the idea of vintage razors, or they don't want the hassle of going to shop for them, so you just want to go to one of the shaving supply online stores or brick and mortar stores and buy a modern razor. So a couple of choices that you can find inexpensively that are really great starter razors is either a Merkur or an Edwin Jagger razor. This Merkur is a two-piece razor. Again, you're going to twist the bottom and remove it like that, just like the other two-piece razors. This Edwin Jagger is a three-piece design with a removable handle, base plate, and top cap. Now, what will happen a lot of the time if somebody's brand new, they order one of these three-piece razors, they're very excited, they get it in, they open it up, they put a blade in the top cap, and they load it up, they put the base plate back on, and they go to shave with it, and they're like, I don't get it, it's not cutting. It's just wiping the lather off my face. I don't feel the blade at all. Well, what happens is they actually loaded this razor, and they put the base plate on upside down. That leaves no space at all for that razor blade to poke out, and there's no way possible that that blade is going to cut you. It's a very common mistake. All you have to do is be careful to note which way the blade came off, or the base plate came off rather, and assemble it the same way. Now, I have actually heard of some of these being assembled wrong at the factory and being delivered that way. So the other thing you want to look for is when you do assemble it, there should be a gap in between the top cap and the base plate. That gap is where your razor blade is going to stick out and actually give you some exposure. So if you don't see that exposure of that blade, then it's probably on upside down. So there you have it, a little bit of introduction into double edge razors. If you have more questions, you can put them in the comments below. Go to our Badger and Blade wiki site. If you have a question about date codes, you want to look up a certain date code, we've got an entire page in the wiki dedicated to dating your razors. Or post a question on the forum in the double edge razor forum. We've got lots of people with lots of knowledge. You've got a steward there who'll answer all your questions. And please, if you enjoy these videos, like our page, go to YouTube, subscribe to our page, like the videos. If you have any questions, again, put them in the comments. I'm the Vez2. We thank you for joining us at badgerandblade.com. Enjoy your shaves, and as always, your mileage may vary.